Mandla. Awethu. Mhlaba. Awethu. 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 Mhlaba. Awethu. Mhlaba. Awethu. Long live Mkhonto weSizwe, long live. Tata Ncamalala, tata. Tata Msholozi, tata. Mandla. Ngiyabonga kakhulu phathi wehlelo. Ngibonge nobuholi bonke obukhona la. Introduce kwabo before. I'm not going to single out anyone. Into engijabulisa kakhulu is the cooperation between Youth League yethu ne student movement. That is a very, very important development. Asibashayele izandla ngalokho. And therefore, ngicela ukuphakamisa u-convener we-Youth League no-convener we-student movement so that sibone le unit esikhuluma ngayo. Mbali. Amanda. Tina, who are from both the student movement and the youth movement, were very happy when we see that cooperation. Ogunye, I just also want to introduce, there are two comrades here. Since I'm the convener in the Eastern Cape, who have traveled all the way from the Eastern Cape, who are here, who have just joined us. Commander Andy and Nika and Commander Tess Bebikyala. Long live cooperation between KZN and Eastern Cape, long live. Mandla. Comrades, we are very serious ke Eastern Cape ukuthi there's a municipality there called Buffalo City. It's the only municipality where the ANC is governing very comfortably. And we are sure ukuthi next year sizolandela like you la eThekwini. Siyayithatha eThekwini, siyayithatha. Siyayithatha Buffalo City, siyayithatha. Run Ramaphosa, run. Run Ramaphosa, run. Thank you, comrades. Ngiceliwe ke la ukuthi ngizonza i-political lecture. Now, i-political lecture ke ifuna ukuthi silalele. So it's different from the agitation based on uqiniso la. Political lecture is different from a political speech, but it's also different from the academic lecture as a university. A political lecture is just an excuse. So lana sizohabulisana ngithi. Inkinga ukuthi we have started late. Mina ngithanda ukuthi makune political lecture afterwards kube khona isikhathi la kuba khona ama questions and answers. So that sibe ne interaction ngoba mangimela angisi umfundisi. Nami kuyenze ukuthi ngithole ukufunda from the comrades who are here. Kodwa ke sizobona ukuthi isikhathi siyasivumela ukuthi singafika kuleso stage. In the last lecture that I gave here in Durban, I dealt with the formation of Umkhonto weSizwe, the stages, the underground stage before we got to the announcement Young A16 Zagat December, and a lot of work that was done to make sure that Umkhonto weSizwe becomes the reality that it is now. That period was very difficult ngoba best operator underground i-enemy ingazi nokuthi kukhona lo mcabango okufoma umkhonto wesizwe until kwafika la ukuthi i-MK ibe above the ground, and then 5 months later sabamangaza kuma elections, and lana eThekwini hayi ukuthi nabamangaza nababulala nyi bafile nje angeke bavuke futhi. Phansi Sibusiso Duma, phansi. Phansi Mtolo, phansi. Comrades, let me start with the lecture. And ngicela ukuthi ke, as I say, ngumkhabulo silalele, because one day nawe all these things engizozisho la ufanele ukuthi uzisho in different meetings and different places. Nokuthi manihlangene as ama branch mhlawumbe le copy yale lecture ngizoyinika leadership at the right stage. At some stage umuntu angazifundela yona, si discuss in our branches, in our different campuses and so on. So I've decided to give a heading to today's lecture. And what it really does is to pick out certain periods in our history. And we say it's 49 years since 16 June 1976, and 1 year since 14 June 2024. And therefore I've called this lecture From the Soweto Massacre to the GNU Massacre. Many people don't realize that today, 14th of June, it is exactly 1 year since the evil GNU was formed. You might remember on the 14th of June last year, the day in which the DA and the ANC voted for Cyril Ramaphosa to be the president, and voted for Thoko Didiza to be the speaker, and somebody called, I think, Annelie Lothrit or something like that from the DA to be the deputy speaker. That was the marriage between ANC and the DA, the Freedom Front Plus. And I call that, I contrast that in this lecture as the same thing that happened when they were shooting our children and ourselves on the 16th of June 1976. Umehluko is very small. In the massacre of 1976, we could count the bodies. We knew Uguti so-and-so has been killed. But in this massacre of last year, called the GNU, they were killing all of us, all 60 million of us. And they were stealing our country. And although we were not able to count the bodies, but history will show that that was a day last sithengiswa khona nguRamaphosa ne-ANC yakhe, to the extent that it is going to take us many years to recover from that. Comrades, I start by saying that I give greetings and salutations to the leadership of the Youth League and all the formations of the broader Mkhonto Wesizwe family present here today. Although we in the mother body always occupy the center stage, the truth is that the most important structures in MK are the MK Women's League, MK Students Movement, and of course the MK Youth League. Naturally, we must also recognize the crucial role of religious and traditional leaders in the movement. But today, it's all about the youth in commemoration of June 16. And I speak as one of the generation of 1976, although we participated far away from the center of the war, which was in Soweto. I speak as someone who is exactly 1 year older than Hector Peterson, the first victim of the uprising. It was a time of political awakening, but also a time of death. The deadly events ironically breathed life into the struggle for liberation. This came as no surprise because the youth is always the backbone of every revolution and every war effort. Just as we relied on young people to reignite the revolution, so did the apartheid regime. It was compulsory for all white males upon reaching the age of 18 to be conscripted into the apartheid army. So whenever you meet a white male who's older than 50 years, there is more than a 90% chance that you are looking at an apartheid soldier, a person who was once prepared to die in defense of racism. You must therefore excuse some of us for the disgust we feel when those defenders of apartheid today call us anti-constitutionalists. What I'm saying here, my comrade, is that young people are the most important detachment in any revolution. And that the youth of 1976, the youth of 1944 that Commander Qiniso was talking about, those are people who took umzabalazo way to a particular level. But what I'm saying is that both sides of that war, Tina as abantu, plus the enemy, relied on young people. So Amapunu made sure that all white people, white males, mabefika ku 18 years old, bafanele baye join SADF to defend the apartheid. Namhlanje labo bantu are all to be found in structures like the DA and the FF+. Those people who killed young people in 1976 and even my generation in the 80s are now in the FF+ and the DA. Uramaphosa wants us, we must think ukuthi inkululeko yethu can come from the same people who are killing us for wanting that freedom. Ayikho into njalo. It will never happen, comrades. Kudlalwa ngathi nje. Both the 1976 and 1980s or COSAS generations were prepared to lay down their lives in the fight against Bantu education because it was a system deliberately designed to steal our futures. We did not need to be conscripted or forced. We participated voluntarily in the struggle. For this, we were shot at, killed, maimed, imprisoned, and exiled in the hands of one of the most brutal crimes against humanity known as apartheid. Today, we have returned the beneficiaries of apartheid to political power, thanks to the same African National Congress, whose ranks were swelled by the majority of the youth of 1976 who fled the country. Every one of the millions of white DA voters is either a former apartheid soldier or directly related to one. By this, comrades, I'm saying we must understand what we're dealing with here. In every white family in South Africa, all the people who vote for the DA, one person there is an apartheid soldier. Either ubaba wakhona or uncle or umkhulu, but there's an apartheid soldier in every family. And those are the people manje kufanele ukuthi basiphe inkululeko. Ikhona into njalo, my comrade. There is therefore a direct relationship between the two political massacres which took place for 48 years apart. One on the 16th of June 1976 and the other one on the 14th of June 2024. Today we must commemorate both these massacres simultaneously. We gather here 2 days before the 49th anniversary of the first political massacre and exactly on the first anniversary of the second and most recent political massacre. The victims of the first massacre have tragically and by choice delivered us to the second massacre. Ironically, they also brought us the Marikana economic massacre in between. We should have read the signs. I will argue today in this lecture that the GNU massacre is much more vicious and deadly for black people than all the other massacres. The Sharpeville massacre, the Bishop massacre, the Langa massacre, Duncan Village massacre, Buibatong massacre, and even the Marikana massacre, all combined. As I've said, in all those massacres, we could count the bodies. We could identify the injury list, and we could point to the affected families. The current GNU massacre is here to kill the hopes and aspirations of all of us. Almost 10 times the victims of the Nazi Holocaust, which is regarded as the worst human tragedy until the current genocide in Palestine. Another example of victim turned perpetrator. All those massacres, tragic as they were, took the revolution forward. The GNU massacre is taking us 10 steps backwards. And unless we crush it with the power of the young people, it will survive. I'm saying, comrades, that the people who are going to crush this current massacre called the GNU are the young people, is this leadership that is sitting here. And those of us who fought with petrol bombs a long time ago might be here to give guidance. But it is the energy and the vibrancy of the youth that is going to take us forward. The main focus of this lecture is to analyze what happened before, during, and after the political massacre of South African revolutionary history, exactly 1 year ago today, when the DA voted for Cyril Ramaphosa and the DA voted for Thoko Didiza and the ANC voted for Lothrit. In that moment, the spirit of Hector Peterson, who was sold for 30 pieces of silver. The theme of this lecture is that from now on, the month of June must be remembered for two political massacres, the 76 massacre and the so-called GNU massacre. As far as serious revolutionary activities are concerned, in South Africa, the best years for white racists and the worst years for black people were the 15 years between 1961 to 1976. Although there were some significant organizational developments, mainly driven by the emergence of Steve Biko's Black Consciousness movement in the late 60s, in truth, there was hardly any political upheaval in the country. The emerging trade union movement also did its best to keep the proverbial fires burning. That means that for the first 15 years since the declaration of a white republic on the 31st of May 1961, introducing the first apartheid constitution, white people had a blissful time at the expense of what they called non-Europeans. Today, the white population has made a complete flip-flop and they call themselves Africans, while fellow Africans are called foreigners, but not the self-proclaimed Europeans. The history of the struggle of Africans against colonialism and apartheid and neo-apartheid is the history of victories and battles and defeats in the liberation. We have won some battles, but to date we have lost the war of liberation. There has always been about who controls the productive economic forces in this society in the form of the primary assets of land, labor, and capital. Until we obtain the control over those assets, the war for liberation is far from over. Since the war is not yet over, maybe we should not say that we have lost, but we should say we are losing the war at this stage. We are even experiencing reversals, such as the GNU of 14 June 2024. But rest assured, we will prevail in this war. The people's victory is certain. Most importantly, the sole reason we have lost the war is because of being sold out to the enemy by our own at some of the most crucial historical times. For almost 4 centuries, the enemy has defeated us by employing the very same tactic, divide and rule. Umkhonto weSizwe is here to solve that problem. Lana, my comrade, I'm saying that every time since 1652, white people have defeated us by using the same weapon, dividing us as black people. MK is here to ask for the unity of all black people, because the tool that we have, the weapon that we have to fight for our liberation is our unity. And it's not going to be easy to achieve that unity, but it has to start right now. Some of the most historically recent examples of selling out by black people happened when about 10 black leaders, quote unquote, agreed to lead the so-called homelands, which divided African people into tribal or ethnic entities, occupying the most unproductive and unwanted parts of South Africa. Some even opted for the so-called independence as fake countries within South Africa. So kumbula ukuthi amabhunu after taking over in 1948 decided ukuthi umuntu omnyama must be divided into 10 separate entities. So we had independent countries, so-called countries. Ciskei, Transkei, Bophuthatswana, Venda. Nisazikhumbula lezo ndawo. Those were supposed to be so-called independent countries. And then they had another 4 that were called self-governing states. Those ones were Qwaqwa, Lebowa, Gazankulu, and KwaZulu. So those were supposed to be self-governing states. And then there were 2 called Kangwane and KwaNdebele. So that was a trick by white people to make sure ukuthi asihlangane, although, so abantu abamhlophe bona, they all belong to the rest of South Africa. They didn't have homelands. So they were united against us. And I say that strangely, very few people recognize 14th June 2024 as another significant milestone for selling out of our people and turning our country, this time into one single big homeland, with one single homeland leader called Cyril Ramaphosa. Comrades, what happened on 14th of June was simply this. After Umkhonto weSizwe achieved the unthinkable in unseating the ANC from power, the ANC voluntarily and with its eyes open chose to turn its back on its former comrades in Umkhonto weSizwe, the EFF and other smaller black-led parties, and chose instead to go to bed with right-wing racists, the Democratic Alliance and the ultra-right Freedom Front Plus, which is the political wing of AfriForum, together with a group of black-led parties called Abakapi. Abakapi are those small black parties that decided to join the GNU. They are the PAC, the UDM, BOSA, Rise Mzansi, Patriotic Alliance, Good Party, and the IFP. All of those parties decided to sell out and join the sellout GNU. Phansi ngabo phansi. Now, what happened is that this name called Abakapi, that means those who are just accompanying the ANC and the DA. So kukhona umshado la, there was a marriage of the ANC and the DA. We know ukuthi emshadweni kukhona abantu abakhaphayo angithi ama bridesmaid. So these ones abo PAC, it's worse ngiyababona bonke. PAC is the biggest sellout because the PAC left the ANC in 1959 because the ANC was working with the white people, and now the PAC of today should be ashamed of itself for walking out on black people and joining the marriage of the ANC and the DA. I'm a man. Phansi PAC kanyoto phansi. Phambili nge-PAC kaSobukwe phambili. Apart from the national instinct to sell out, absolutely nothing forced the ANC to make that disastrous choice. The ANC knows about the historical examples of divide and rule. It knows about landlessness of our people. It knows that its newfound partners are vehemently opposed to any affirmative or transformative action which seeks to redress the imbalances of the past, such as BBBEE or Employment Equity Act. They are against the Skills Development Act. They are against the Preferential Procurement Act. They are against NHI, BILA Act, land expropriation. Yet the ANC chose to sleep with the enemy and to yield power to the real anti-constitutionalists who are fundamentally opposed to the Equality Clause, which is the backbone of our Constitution. The ANC knows that the parties it rejected, such as MK, are born out of the more radical wings of the ANC. But the ANC chose to move to the right instead of moving to the left. It had a choice to have a progressive or to go regressive. And it chose to turn back the clock of apartheid. On this day, exactly one year ago, Fikile Mbalula and Helen Zille signed a pact called the Statement of Intent to give away any hopes of the much-needed radical, fundamental, social, political, and economic change in this country. It symbolized an unholy alliance, an evil alliance, with those who hanker back to the prospect of returning to apartheid, and with the forces whose sole mission is preserving as much of the apartheid legacy as possible. What could possibly be common ground between the ANC, the DA, and FF+? Anything which is in the best interest of the enemies of progress and transformation works directly at the expense and the detriment of the victims of oppression. One cannot have it both ways. What I'm saying here, comrades, is that once kube khona into ejabulisa abelungu, then you must know ukuthi le nto icinezela thina. Naturally, why would abo Helen Zille nabo John Stacey bajabule kangaka ngale nto ye-GNU if ikhuphula thina? So as soon as we see them protecting Ramaphosa, protecting the GNU, then it means we know good there's something wrong with this GNU. Phansi nge-GNU phansi. The tragedy is that the ANC and its leaders know, just as the Nationalist Party of P.J. Foster, P.W. Botha, and de Klerk knew that apartheid was evil, the ANC knows that the legacy of colonialism cannot be reformed by collaboration with the same forces that caused it. The ANC is only driven by greed and the love of money above the love of the long-suffering masses of our people. And it is not for the first time. In 2004, the ANC entered into a merger with the National Party of Verwoerd, Vorster, Botha, and de Klerk. And in 2024, it entered into another unholy alliance with the forces of darkness. Any black person who still thinks that the current ANC can take them out of bondage is living in dreamland. The ANC of Ramaphosa had a free choice to go with the progressive black parties who want to destroy the legacy of apartheid. The ANC voted with the DA. History will record this as another moment of major selling out of our people by our own. But the duty of any revolutionary is not just to analyze the situation. It is not just to diagnose the problem. A revolutionary is a doctor of society. His or her main duty is to cure. But like medical doctors, you cannot cure that which you have not been able to diagnose or analyze. That is the role of Umkhabulo as we are having today. The single most important question for a revolutionary is to ask the question, what is to be done? And the single most important duty of young people in 2025 is to spend every minute analyzing the current political epoch of the so-called GNU, exposing it for what it truly is, and devising strategies to crush it. The masses of our people have woken up to the fact that the single most important obstacle between our people and their total freedom is the African National Congress of Cyril Ramaphosa. That butcher of Marikana and the man who more recently sold us out in broad daylight in front of Donald Trump. Nimbonile Cyril Ramaphosa encenga Donald Trump. Esihlaza esenza sibe ashamed to be South Africans. It was no coincidence that when Ramaphosa had to choose his A-team to represent the views of South Africa, he chose Anton Rupert, John Steenhuisen, Annie Els, and Retief Goosen, together with a few black people willing to sell their souls. So again, Ramaphosa, when he was going to Trump, decided to hambe namapunu because they are the people who paid for him to be the president of this country. Phansi ko Ramaphosa, phansi. Like the youth of 1976, it falls to the youth of 2025 to say this far and no further. Enough is enough. It is your future which is at stake. It is your choice what kind of South Africa and Africa you want your children to inherit. My generation took up stones, petrol bombs, and later guns and bombs to show its rejection of the homeland system and the black puppet councils and of the apartheid regime. In return, we were killed and detained. Yours is a much easier struggle. It is simply to mobilize voters and to install a progressive government which will be based on the will of the people, which will restore the land to its rightful owners, which will introduce free education and health care, which will place the unity of South Africans and Africans above all else. A government whose mission is the total liberation of our people. Total liberation includes political liberation, economic liberation, social liberation, spatial liberation, ideological and cultural emancipation. By total liberation, we mean totally reversing the ills caused to our people in the past 373 years, since the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck in 1652. Umkhonto wesizwe believes correctly that the promised land will only come into being if we unite all our people behind the banner of total liberation. In so doing, we must not worship the color of a t-shirt. This war cannot be won by political parties alone. It cannot be won by leaders alone. It will not be won by religious leaders alone. It will not be won by traditional leaders acting alone. It will not be won by the progressive forces which may still be found in the ANC, by the MK party alone, by the economic freedom fighters, or by the ATM alone. It will only be won if we unite all those forces behind the goal of total liberation. Some will emphasize political freedom. Others will champion economic freedom. Yet others will highlight cultural and ideological emancipation. But all must fight for total freedom. The People's Movement for Total Liberation is bigger than Umkhonto weSizwe. It is bigger than any single entity or organization. Comrades, this will not come easy. It will not be achieved overnight. We must be realistic. Something which has eluded us for almost 4 centuries cannot be achieved in 1 or 2 years. The enemy is not sleeping. It will intensify its strategy to divide us. Fake leaders with big egos will come and go. Money mongers will sell out at the first sight of the millions of white monopoly capital. Agent provocateurs and CIA agents will be sent to cause internal divisions inside our organizations. Gossip mongers will create divisions at every twist and turn, and they will make us fight one another. They will sow division and mistrust among us. Tribalists will find creative ways to divide us. Right-wing media will call us names. There will be setbacks, disappointments, and reversals. And yet, we must soldier on. Anybody who tells you that the new struggle for total liberation will be easy does not understand what we're up against. Because of the huge size of the task, there is no time to rest, comrades. Each one must teach one. If you win just one single person per day to believe in the work of the project for total liberation, you have done a huge and revolutionary task. But the starting point is to build a strong Umkhonto weSizwe party. And the second task is to preach the message of unity of the oppressed. Not against white people as human beings, and not against any specific individuals, but against white supremacy. The enemy is the ideology of individualism, selfishness, and greed, of capitalism and all other foreign and African tendencies. The need to internalize the values of Umkhonto weSizwe is paramount. We need to live up to those values. It is not an easy task, comrades. We must not tire in educating ourselves and others about the values of Umkhonto weSizwe. We must choose one value of Umkhonto weSizwe to internalize. Every week, we must teach each other about the values of Umkhonto weSizwe. On Monday, we must learn and debate the two paramount values of Ubuntu and unity in action. What is the meaning of these two values in the revolution? What are their theoretical underpinnings? How can that theory be translated into action and guide the movement to total liberation? The youth have a role in fulfilling this task. On Tuesday, we must deal with the values of Pan-Africanism, patriotism and equality, as well as honesty and respect. On a Wednesday, we must deal with democratic centralism, mandates and accountability, and the culture of reporting, and unpack what those values mean. On a Thursday, we must tackle the other values of organic forms of public representation, and my favorite, which is discipline and hard work. And finally, on a Friday, we must debate issues of knowledgeability and meritocracy, as well as the all-important issue of class consciousness. Those are the 10 values of Umkhonto weSizwe, comrades. In his address to the nation on the 16th December 2023, President Zuma said, and I quote, "I call on all South Africans to join me in taking the important step and vote for the MK Party and any other progressive party which seeks the total liberation and the return of our land to its rightful owners, the African people." President Zuma proceeded to say, "The task ahead requires young and older leaders alike to pull in the same direction. No single organization can pull us out of the present crisis. We require the same spirit which saw us defeating the monster of apartheid," unquote. If we listen carefully to those powerful words and those powerful sentences, we will attain our freedom in no time. If we unpack and analyze each sentence of what former President Zuma was saying, we will see the light. Because most of you were not born in the 80s, when my generation broke the back of the once mighty apartheid regime, let me only address the last sentence from President Zuma's historical announcement. What did he mean when he says, "We require the same spirit which saw us defeating the monster of apartheid"? On the 20th of August 1983 in Cape Town, we formed an organization called the United Democratic Front. At its best time, the UDF was a collection of about 500 different organizations, all united behind one single cause of crushing apartheid and creating a united, non-racial and non-sexist South Africa. It included various sectors straddling all ages, genders, religions, languages, ideological and geographic differences, all united behind one single mission. Exactly 1 year later, in August or September 1984, the first actions were carried out under the banner of the UDF, and they were sparked in the Val Triangle. From that moment on, the country was in action. 5 years later, Nelson Mandela led all political prisoners back into society, and Oliver Tambo led all exiles back into the country to prepare for democratic elections which took place in 1994. And what brought us to that moment was the unity of our people behind the United Democratic Front. There were many other factors which brought all the democratic breakthrough of 1994. In those days, we called it the 4 pillars of the struggle, which were the armed struggle, international solidarity, the underground movement, and mass mobilization. But the most important of these, which drove all the others, was mass mobilization. This was achieved by the tool of a united front. That is why President Zuma went on to say in his 2023 address to the nation, and I want you to listen to the words of President Zuma on the 16th of December 2023 again. He said, and I quote, "In the past few months, I have held several meetings with leaders of our people across the spectrum, including about 10 registered progressive political parties, with the aim of fostering the much-needed unity of the historically oppressed and dispossessed in South Africa. We are also discussing the formation of a patriotic front and a voting bloc after the people's victory in the 2024 elections, to pursue a minimum consensus program of no more than 10 points of agreement to get us out of the present crisis, which is in the process of being formulated. The single aim is to steer the ship of total liberation from colonialism back on course by uniting Africans across the country, the African continent, and the African diaspora behind the battle for land, justice, radical economic transformation towards economic freedom. There can never be reconciliation without socio-economic justice, unquote. Again, let me unpack the last sentence of former President Zuma. What did he mean when he says there can never be reconciliation without socio-economic justice? This is a very profound statement, a call for friendship to our white compatriots. Those who believe that there can ever be true non-racialism and reconciliation between the black victims of apartheid and the white beneficiaries without addressing the cruel legacy of apartheid are making a fatal mistake. The so-called GNU is premised on that fatal mistake, and that it is possible to reform inequality in the most unequal society in the world. Steenhuisen, Helen Zille, Groenewald, Rupert, and the leadership of white people celebrate the so-called GNU because they say it will stop the so-called doomsday coalition of ANC, MK, and the EFF. This is a nice way to say that the GNU is a cure against black progressive unity. Soon they will realize that the real doomsday will come with measures such as the so-called GNU, designed to delay the inevitable total liberation of Africans. It makes no sense to postpone this inevitable outcome. The patience of our people is not endless. One day they may not be prepared to listen to a Jacob Zuma telling them that the ballot and not the bullet is the solution. That is the waiting tragedy of the so-called GNU. Ramaphosa and Steenhuisen are not capable of stopping the march of history. Umkhonto weSizwe is here to make sure that that does not happen. One of the DA negotiators, Tony Leon, has made very important statements in his new book. He says that the main reason for forming the GNU was to stop the unity between the ANC, MK, and the EFF. To achieve this, he says that behind the scenes, he had talks with two people, Rolf Meyer, a former National Party cabinet minister, and Pravin Gordhan, a key figure in the Ramaphosa ANC. Tony Leon says on page 76 of his book that both Rolf Meyer and Pravin Gordhan were, I quote, adamant that the EFF and MK entry into government would be disastrous, and the constitutionalists needed to keep that option far away. He writes, Pravin was keener on a loose DA-ANC tie-up, while Rolf favored a coalition of the centrists, as he put it, unquote. So that means we were sold out by people like Pravin Gordhan, who were talking behind the scenes to the white leaders of the DA. Tony Leon also makes it clear that the deal was sealed on the back of big business and ordinary white people who were also keen to keep away organizations like MK. John Steenhuisen confirmed this to Donald Trump a few weeks ago when he called MK that lot. It is now clear that the main common goal for the DA and the ANC was to install Cyril Ramaphosa as the president of South Africa. All else was of secondary importance. As the youth, it is your mission. This is your struggle. This is your war. The weapon is unity in action towards total liberation. Yours is to defeat the so-called GNU and replace it with progressive unity. Finally, we must reject the latest gimmick called the national dialogue. This month of June looks like it's a bad month for black people. Not only did we have June 16 and the June the 14th, now we've been told about the so-called national dialogue. And I want to make a call to young people here to reject the national dialogue. It is yet another tactic to delay us and to number us away from the urgent task of progressive unity. It is driven by a collection of like-minded disciples of the current neoliberal order, which got us into the national crisis in the first place. The so-called eminent persons group tells you that Ramaphosa is meeting with his own ideological friends. What gives Ramaphosa, who was rejected by more than 60% of South African voters, the right to handpick birds of the same feather and call it a national dialogue? When a person talks to himself, it is not a dialogue, but it is usually a sign of madness. We are not a nation of mad people. The so-called national dialogue is nothing but the ugly twin brother of the so-called GNU. We must reject both with the contempt it deserves. It is an attempt to legitimize the sellout ANC-DA FF Plus regime. In the 1980s, as I said, only a united front inspired by the 10 goals of the Freedom Charter as espoused by the MK party can get us off the present crisis. And in the 1980s, that united front stood in the face of the fake unity of the apartheid regime. We must today also say the same message. Songoba simunye kopano kimatla. In 2 weeks' time, on the 26th of June, we'll be celebrating 70 years of the Freedom Charter. I challenge the MK Youth League and the student movement, together with MK student movement, to announce that on that day, we will have a series of lectures and essays from that day onwards, over a period of about 6 months, to interrogate whether any of the 10 clauses of the Freedom Charter have been fulfilled in the past 31 years. Those essays, comrades, must provide a radical interpretation of the Freedom Charter and the answer to the question, what is to be done? If you accept that challenge, leadership of the youth and the youth leadership of the student movement, I will personally raise and donate 70,000 rand to be paid to the best of those essays. The person who comes up with the best essay will receive that 70,000 rand. And the person who comes with the second best will receive 30,000 rand. I challenge you at universities and in our communities to work with all the formations and to, as the older generation, we played our part and we can only give guidance. But you are the owners of the future. No war was ever fought by old people. You must pick up the spear and fight for total liberation. In 1944, Anton Lembede, who was mentioned here, formed the African National Congress Youth League. And he said the reason he formed the African National Congress Youth League was because, and I'm quoting him, the ANC's collaboration with the oppressors. So you are facing the same situation of the ANC's collaboration with the oppressors. He believed that we needed national liberation, and he believed that true non-racialism was not possible without equal distribution of the land. We know that the economic crisis we face is represented by potholes, by corruption, by crime, by gender-based violence, and unemployment. And Karl Marx famously said that philosophers have analyzed the world, but the point is to change it. We do not need philosophers, we need action. The answer to the question, what is to be done, correctly lies in the collective abilities of young people. The war for total liberation requires soldiers. You, the youth, must use your youthful energy to go door to door, to zigzag the towns and the villages of our people, the farms, the squatter camps of the nation, to spread the message of unity for total liberation. The call is unity for total liberation. The call is down with the GNU. The call is down with Ramaphosa's GNU. The call is away with the false GNU of monologue, away with Ramaphosa's GNU, away. Jacob Zuma and MK are calling on you, young lions, and all of you to go and make sure that our people are liberated. Asiyeni enkululekweni ephelele, asiyeni bo. Hlangana mntu omnyama, hlangana. Roar, young lions, roar. Umkhulu umsebenzi wenkululeko ufuna amajoni, umsholozi ufuna amajoni. Amandla. Awethu. Roar, young lions, roar. Roar, young lions, roar. Tata msholozi, tata. Mandla. Matla. Karuna. Karuna. Matla. Umhlaba. Owethu. Umhlaba. 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 Thank you.